Mark Sawatka, the General Secretary of the PCS Union, has been speaking to LBC.
Civil servants work for the government. We deliver universal credit, collect taxes, keep our borders secure, issue driving licences, issue passports. We are essential to everyday life. Yet 45,000 civil servants claim benefits because their pay is so low. 40,000 of them are using food banks. We have a crisis of poverty in the civil service, and yet the government has told people their pay will go up by 2% when inflation is 10% and rising.
London's tube network has been largely closed today because of a different strike over pay and pensions. A man's been convicted of anti-Semitic attacks on 3 Jewish people, including a 14-year-old boy in North London. 30-year-old Abdullah Qureshi travelled from West Yorkshire to Stamford Hill to carry out the crimes last August. He'll be sentenced next month. The former US President Donald Trump says he will still be making what he's called a big announcement next week about his plans to launch a fresh bid for the White House. He's rejected efforts by his advisers to postpone Tuesday's speech at his resort in Florida. Our US correspondent Simon Marks reports.
Stung by the Republican Party's failure to deliver a red wave of support across the US, several members of Donald Trump's inner circle urged him to scrub next Tuesday's planned speech and instead wait until it's clear which party will end up controlling the Senate. But that could be weeks away, and the former president wants to get on with it. His team confirmed that invitations are being issued to attend his announcement, and they're dismissing efforts by the media, the corporate elites and the political establishment to get Trump to have a rethink. Simon Marks, LBC, Washington.
Ukraine's president has told his troops to be cautious about Russian orders to withdraw their troops from the southern city of Kherson. Russia's commander in Ukraine said yesterday the retreat was an attempt to protect the life and health of its servicemen. And the Leicester midfielder James Maddison says dreams really do come true after making England's World Cup squad. Newcastle striker Callum Williamson and also Manchester United's Marcus Rashford are also in the 26-man group. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 79 points at 73.75. The pound will buy $1.16 and also €1.14. LBC weather. Rain continuing in northern Scotland tonight and patchy light rain for the west with a low of 11. And then rain in the far northwest moving into Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow, but drier in the south with a high of 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Daly.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10. We're streaming this hour on Global Player if you'd like to watch us. And that's because we have the very glamorous Amanda Prowse with us, best-selling author, good friend of the programme. I don't know how many times you've been on since I started this programme, Amanda, but it must be quite a lot. And that's because the listeners love hearing from you and they love reading your books. Now, how many books have you sold altogether now, do you think?
I think nearly 10 million.
10 million books. I'd like to get to 1 million, frankly. But I mean, let's. You've written this memoir called Women Like Us, and obviously most of your books are novels. Do you find writing non-fiction more challenging than writing fiction? Because I know you told me once that you get an idea in your head for a novel and you just write it. You don't have a chapter plan. You don't have a plot. It all just sort of comes out as you write. You can't really do that with a non-fiction book, can you?
No, you can't. It's very different and a different discipline. And I think with fiction, I get to craft the most pleasing endings, which is wonderful. For example, if something bad happens to a character, I always erase that line and say, and actually, it was a dream and she was asleep on a beach having a lovely time, because I can't bear to leave them in jeopardy and then erase it the next morning. But when it's your own story, which this is my story, I didn't get to do that. And I think it was cathartic, but also quite painful. I had to dig quite deep and look at my life, going back to childhood to the present day. And I didn't really think I'd show it to anyone. I thought I was writing it for my own benefit. But I hope it is something that will be interesting and of benefit to people like me, women like me.
And I think it's interesting because in a way, and I don't mean this in a sort of pejorative way, but I mean, you had quite an ordinary upbringing in many ways. I mean, but you had lots of struggles with which you were trying to cope with almost by yourself. And you had all of the usual things, particularly as a teenager, sort of body shame, didn't you?
Yeah, very much so. And I have had a very ordinary life and a very ordinary upbringing. And that's actually the point, that this is all of our stories. I think it's very relatable. But I come from a very large, close family where I've been adored all my life by my family, particularly my mum and dad, who are incredible. And I think I never knew how to get out the blocks, Ian. I think if I look back to my childhood and thought, well, I'd love to get a book published, or I'd love to travel the world, I thought, well, that's not for people like me. You've got to either be wealthy, and have an east wing with a library on it, preferably a couple of staff. Wouldn't that be nice? Or you've got to be...
you had that now with your 10 million book sale.
Yes, it depends what has been, darling. Or I think it's, I thought you've got to be super skinny. And I was never in the attractive club or the glamorous club or the sporty club or the clever club. I was just very, very ordinary, actually. And I didn't know how to get out the blocks. And I had all these ideas in my head of the life I wanted. How did you get to be that person? How did you get to have that house and drive that car and have a wonderful relationship and look great and be healthy? How did you get to do that when you're someone like me? I didn't know how it was possible. And I think it put a lot of pressure on me, as it does on lots of us, particularly now. Life is hard for an awful lot of people.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, because what was I doing the other day? No, yesterday. I asked someone the question, I think it may have been on Cross Question, when I said, would you like to have been a teenager nowadays or when you were a teenager? Because to my mind, being a teenager now is much more difficult than being a teenager when we were. I mean, you're a few years behind me, but sort of in the 70s. And the pressures on teenagers now are so much more. Whether it's to do with how you look or what you want to do later in life, the whole thing about having an ordinary life seems to have been chucked out the window. Everyone expects to have an extraordinary life.
I think that's really true. I think not only is there pressure from this sort of, instant gratification, life and success and currency is measured in likes and ticks and comments and approval on social media. So I think particularly things should be instant. And of course it isn't. You have to work hard for things, and things come slowly. It's about deferred gratification, which is how we were taught, really. So I think that's very hard when you think, well, I want to just be a pop star, I want to be a footballer, and it doesn't happen today. I think that's tough. But also, in our age, I mean, I used to work for a big taxi company in London for years, as you know, because you read my book.
Well, I've actually got halfway through. I haven't finished it yet. I just want to tell you that before we go on.
I'll give you some spoilers as we go along in. But I knew I had a very average wage. I knew with that average wage I'd be able to get a mortgage. With that mortgage, I'd be able to provide somewhere for myself to live, whether it was rent or buying or whatever. Now, that is so beyond the reach of people. My sons are 25 and 26. Nearly all their friends are in shared occupancy, in HMO, and they're saying, how do we have a relationship? How do we start a family? How do we get married or live with someone or have kids? How do we do it when I'm in a room and I'm working? But that's my boundary. And it's like, gosh, it is so much harder. And that's before we even get to the cost of living. And try talking to young nurses at the moment who are trying to make ends meet. It's not easy.
What was the most difficult part of growing up for you?
Feeling like I didn't fit in. I was born with a congenital defect in my pelvis that meant I had 12 or 13 operations between the ages of 12 and 20. So I spent it probably years, actually, if I totted it all up, just lying in a hospital bed looking at a ceiling in a gown while everyone was at school discos snogging boys called Dean and Darren. Yourself included, no doubt. And I wasn't one of the... I wasn't one of those girls. I wasn't one of those people. And I thought, and I still sometimes feel, actually, that the world was having a party to which I wasn't invited. And it was a horrible feeling, Ian. I wasn't... I wasn't good enough. I wasn't part of that. And I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to change that. We moved around a lot as well, and I always moved with great energy and enthusiasm, a chance to, shed new skin and start over. But actually, that kind of rootlessness, I think that affected me. And I've only really understood that as I've got older, that now I'm a real home bird. I don't even want to travel. I just want to be at home on the sofa, telly and a cup of tea, and I'm happy. So I think that was the hardest thing, not knowing how to fit in and feeling like I didn't.
When did your issues with weight start?
I think probably always is the truthful answer. I can remember being lovingly and affectionately, teased because I was chubby little thing or because I was very clumsy or all those things. And I think that sort of stuck with me, even though it was said and done with love. I get it. When I was a teenager and I first moved into central London, I kind of stopped eating. I lived off white wine spritzers and the odd bit of toast. My weight plummeted and I was skinny. I wasn't eating enough. I was malnourished. But I loved that feeling. I'm ashamed to say, I flirted with anorexia. I liked the feeling of being empty. I liked the feeling of being thin. And that's how I lived for a number of years. And then when I got pregnant, I think I was 28 when I had Joshie. And it was the first time I'd allowed myself to eat, not maybe excessively, but eat properly, I would say. And my weight ballooned. My body wasn't used to it. And I put on about 3 stone when I was pregnant, which is incredibly, not good for me, not good for the baby, not good for anyone. I thought I'd lose it, and I did. And then I think I found life challenging as I've got older. I've always been slightly obsessed with food. I think about it every second of every day. I plan what I'm going to eat. I plan what I'm going to shop for, ordering quantities of food, online. Could never walk into the kitchen without snaffling a piece of cheese or a bit of cake. Funny, every time I go in the bathroom, I don't have a shower. And yet every time I went in the kitchen, I was just obsessed with food, to the point where a couple of years ago, my weight hit 21 point something stone, I don't know, but I was morbidly obese.
When was that?
2.5 years ago. I'm now down to 15. I'm still fat, but I'm not morbidly obese in the way that I was, because I couldn't really walk before.
I have read that bit of the book, and I think that a lot of people, whether they're male or female, will really understand what you went through then, because it's what I think a lot of people go through. I mean, I've actually, I think 19 was the highest I ever got to, but you talk about not wanting to go out. You talk about not wanting to. I think your husband wanted to go on holiday, and you think, well, I can't possibly be seen on holiday, sort of in this state. And I think people take encouragement from the fact that you have managed to address it. But is it something that can only ever be temporary? I mean, I lost 1.5 stone in the summer when I had COVID, and I vowed that I wasn't going to put it back on again. And I'm now at the stage where I don't weigh myself, because I'm sure that I've put most of it back on again.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's certainly the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think it always will be. I don't think I will magically hit a number on the scales, whatever that number is, and I'll be fixed or cured. This is my addiction. And unlike if your addiction is alcohol or if it's any other drug, your success is measured in days of abstinence, sobriety, which it should be. It's an incredible achievement. When your addiction is food, it's very, very hard to do that, because literally you have to be around it, you have to touch it, buy it, consume it, just to live. And that makes it very tricky. So I honestly think it's a battle that I will have my whole life, but I don't think of it as a battle anymore. And I think it's something that my key to my success, if you will, and ongoing success, is that I've managed to relegate it to just like many other aspects of my life. I'm not so obsessed with it.
But if you have an addictive personality, there's got to be something for you to be addicted to. And I suspect that if it isn't alcohol, it isn't food, it's kind of now your writing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because you're very
right.
disciplined in you describe your working day when you're writing a book, and you're a bit like Jeffrey Archer. In fact, I mentioned you to him when I interviewed him on the Book Club podcast a couple of weeks ago. You should have a listen. And he knew exactly who you were. Is that right? Has the writing taken over some of your other addictions?
Yes, it is an obsession for me. And I've always said if no one bought my books, I'd still do it. So today, for example, I've travelled from North Devon. I think I wrote for 4 hours this morning. I wrote the entire train journey, another 5 hours. And already I feel slightly angsty.
It must have been a slow train.
Several slow trains today.
Well, at least you got one.
And I met some great people as well. It's good. It's great, actually. But I think I still feel like I want to get on with it. And real life and everything else I have to do is just prevents that. You know, when you're doing a project or a craft project, or you're decorating a room, or you're building something, and all you want to do is do that, and work and life gets in the way of that thing. That's exactly how I feel about my writing. It's all I want to do, and everything else is just frustrating, really. But you're absolutely right. It has become my obsession and my addiction.
Well, lots more to talk to Amanda Prowse about, and we want to take some of your calls as well. If you want to talk to Amanda about addictions, about weight, about alcohol, about what it was like for you as a teenager growing up. And if you've read Amanda's book, we'd love to hear from you as well. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. It's 8:15.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 8:19 on LBC. Amanda, in terms of how you publish your books now, you're publishing them, I think, only through Amazon, aren't you, rather than doing it through the conventional publishing route, which, I mean, when you decided to do that you must have thought, well, that's a hell of a risk.
It was, but the trouble was a lot of traditional publishers couldn't keep up with me. I write very quickly.
You do 4 books a year, don't you?
Yeah, and they're very keen to do 1 book a year. And I'm thinking, what do I do with the rest of the time? You know, Amazon can keep up with me in that way. And, you know, during COVID and times like that when we were in lockdown, of course, you can't get to a bookshop. And it's just the convenience of being able to click and buy. For me, it's really worked out very well. But also, you know, my books go down to 99p. You know, classics for your Kindle are free. So the cost of books can come down. And just like, a girl like me who grew up without a library in the East Wing, to be able to buy books, current books and past and present for 99p would have changed my life. It's if you can't get to a library, it's amazing. There's a lot of free reads and a lot of really discounted reads, and it made a big difference, yeah.
And you, as a child, wanted to be a writer, and there aren't many people who have that ambition as a sort of 14-year-old and then go on to achieve it. Do you now, have you got to that point in your life where you can almost relax and think, well, I've done what I set out to do?
I never feel satisfied with my output. I always think I need to do the next one and the next one. So funny enough, I finished a book today and I've already in my head got the next one lined up that I'll start writing tomorrow. So I think that's just how I'm sort of, engineered in that sort of kind of slightly manic, I suppose. I've got to keep doing it. I do think I'm incredibly lucky. I think to be an author, to write books for my job, I didn't even know that was a job. My granddad was a docker, my dad worked in manufacturing, my mum was a hairdresser, my nan was a stay-at-home hypochondriac. I didn't know that, writing a book was a job. And I can remember reading one of the first books I read, which was a book called Mandy by Julie Andrews, chosen for obvious reasons from the library. And I'm thinking, who's done this? Who's put all these words together? And can I do that too? It really changed me when I was 14 and I read The Thornbirds by Colleen McCulloch. Have you read that book?
I have read that.
Absolutely.
No, actually, I think I saw the TV series.
Just as good. One of the rare situations where it was just as good. It had everything. It was unrequited love. It was the Australian desert. It was love and lust. And it was just another world. And I can remember nicking my mum's copy and reading it under the duvet thinking, if ever I could make someone feel the way this woman is making me feel, that would be the most amazing thing. And now when I get contacted by readers and they say, I took every step with this person, whether it's, Rosie or whoever it is, I can't tell you what that means to me. It's an incredible feeling.
Reading a really good novel with a good plot and really interesting characters, I don't think you can beat it. My trouble is now, I generally only read non-fiction. I can't remember the last novel. In fact, it was probably one of yours, the last. I can't keep up with you, so I haven't read all of you. I've read several of them. And you have this unique way of grabbing people's attention in the first few pages, which is really important for a novel. If you haven't got me by page 10, I give up, I'm afraid.
Me too, yeah.
And the characters, authors often spend hours trying to develop the characters before they write a word, but I suspect you're not like that. It just, you do it as you go along.
Yeah, because I can see them. So I know these women, I know these people, and I've created a world. I know what they eat and what they wear and where they go on holiday. So I really give you a snapshot. I give you part of their life as a story. But any of my characters, you could right now ask me about any of my books, any of my characters. I could tell you where they are today, what they're doing, how they've moved on, how they've fared since the end of that novel. So I could write sequels or prequels for every one of them. If I felt like it. I mean, I don't, but I could, because I see them all. They're real to me. So I don't have to think too hard about it because I know them.
Have you never thought about doing what Jeffrey Archer does and does sort of like 8 books with the same main character, just tracing them through their life?
I did that. I've done that in 3 books. Dot Simpson is an elderly lady who makes her first appearance in Poppy Day, one of my first books. And it's Poppy's nan, and she's suffering from dementia. And she makes these outlandish claims about her childhood when she visited the Caribbean. And it's like, oh, bless her, she's got dementia. And it really broke my heart because I wanted people to see that she wasn't just an old lady sitting in the corner in elasticated waisted pants. Actually, she was a teenager, just like you and I, and she had this amazing, vibrant life. So I wrote a prequel with her life called Clover's Child. And then she makes appearance again in Will You Remember Me as a sort of spiritual guiding figure, I suppose, for her granddaughter. So I have done that for Dot's life, and I loved it. And I've written a trilogy called Anna, Theo and Kitty, where it's all of their lives from births until the end of their lives. Big spoiler, not all of them, some of them. And basically it's their whole lives and the interconnections and the twines and the love affairs. And I love doing that. I wrote them all at the same time. That was great fun.
Do you ever base any characters on people that you know?
All of them.
Really?
All of them. Yeah, you have to, because even if it's sort of a subconscious thing, I think you're picking up quirks or the way people say things or a very measured way of speaking. And I think, oh, that's interesting, that's great, and I just lock it away and those traits come out, I think.
Have you ever had anybody say, Mandy, that's me, isn't it, that character?
I have had a woman who wasn't a great close friend say to me, oh, I didn't like her. And I thought, oh dear, because it was very much based on her, yeah.
And she's here with us tonight. I mean, I don't know whether I could write fiction. I did start a novel once about 20 years ago and wrote a chapter, and then I don't know what happened to it, but I came across it 10 years later. So I read it as if it had been written by somebody else. And I thought, wow, this is quite good. I might have a go at this one day, but I never have.
But that's got to be the best sign, hasn't it? If it's hooking you, then it's going to hook other people.
The only idea I've ever had was writing about my great uncle, Clifford Norden, who was killed 10 days before the end of World War I.
Oh.
And I thought, what a great way of doing a novel about somebody who actually existed, about what his life might have been like had he lived.
You'd have to start with his death, wouldn't you? That would have to be the beginning.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can see that, Ian.
So
I think that'd be lovely.
Don't nick that idea.
No, copyrighted, heard here, yep, digitally captured. Oh, that'd be lovely.
I want to talk to you about something that you told me when you came into the studio, because grief is something that we cover a lot on this programme. And I mean, anybody that gets to 50 generally starts going to more funerals than weddings. And I'm certainly at that point, although I've been to do 2 weddings this year. But your family has experienced a real tragedy in the last couple of weeks. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, very sadly. My wonderful younger brother Simon passed away very suddenly a couple of weeks ago. And we are absolutely just felled by grief. And it's weird, isn't it? Because it's the one thing that happens to us all. Grief and death are universal. And yet it feels unique. It feels like your own particular kind of torture, your own particular kind of hell. I think we're still processing it. It's very, very new, very raw, and it doesn't really feel real. Certainly, I don't think it does. And yeah, it's weird, isn't it? We were sort of just bumbling along and worrying about Christmas and, where we were going to go for lunch and who's buying the crackers and that sort of stuff. And suddenly, real life stops and everything is sort of suspended, and you are, you just want to curl up and get under a duvet really and let everything pass you by. But we are a strong and loving family, and it's that love that will be our glue. And my parents are just, I don't know how they're doing it really, Ian. They're being amazing for us, I know, and sort of falling apart in quiet, I guess. But we will all get through it together because we have each other, and that's exactly what Simon would say and want.
And in terms of longer term, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, both of my parents died in the last 10 years. And I thought when my father died, that was when I kind of grew up, because there's no one to fall back on then.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a close relationship with your parents, it's sort of the thing that you dread most. And one of my sisters said, we're orphans now, which was it's actually my dad was like lying there and she said it was sort of gallows humour, and I thought, well, we all laughed, but I thought, you're right.
Absolutely right. I mean, even now, I have a wonderful husband. I have 2 grown-up sons who are amazing, but still, it's my mum and dad I'll phone if I, can't find change for the bus, or I need a direction or a cooking instruction, which I do regularly. I'll call my mum and dad because they're my mum and dad. And even though I'm a grown-up, I'm 55 and I'm still very, very fortunate, I know, to have my mum and dad. They're the people I call. So I can't even begin to imagine what that will be like and feel like. I try to imagine it, because I think if I can maybe play it forward a bit, plan it, think about it, it might be less painful. But you know what? Simon's passing has shown me that you can't actually. It is going to be painful, and I almost can't think about it, Ian.
Desmond says on a text, Amanda has such a soft and calm voice. I could listen to her all day. She'd be a great Audible reader. Can you get your books on audiobooks?
Thank you so much, Desmond. I've actually done all my books are on. Yeah, thank you.
It's a horrible thing. I hate recording audiobooks.
Do you? I quite like it. I think
it.
why I like it though, Ian, is because I get to shut in a studio for 5 days and no one can get to me and say, have I got any clean pants and what's for dinner? I quite like it.
Takes all sorts. Somebody else says, Amanda, you're an inspirational author. I remember our English teacher at school, a rather grumpy man, always used to say, if you were going to be an author, you would have been by now. We were a class of 14-year-olds. Glad times have changed. You see, that is so important, isn't it? You need a teacher to give you the inspiration or to believe in you.
Yeah, and I didn't have that. I had a teacher who was quite dismissive. I've actually written about it quite a lot in the book. We were asked, as I think we were about 7 or 8, what we wanted to be when we grew up. And there was the usual hands up. Someone wanted to be a ballet dancer. Someone else wanted to work for Cadbury's and eat all the chocolate, which I thought was very smart. And I think I said, I would like to write a story. And I can remember almost laughing into the back of her hand. And she said, well, hope you've got a plan B. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, she's right. What would I ever write about? Never climbed a mountain, haven't done anything, just lay in bed, having operations on my pelvis, and having water fights with my brothers in the garden of a summer. It's not very glam, and no one's going to want to read about that.
Another text. Hi Ian and Mandy. I absolutely loved this book and devoured it within 2 days. I laughed through some chapters and then cried through the next. One of the most moving parts of the books was the experience of sexual assault as a teenager. Why did you decide to share that dark period of your life with your readers? Lots of love, Grant Tucker.
Grant
was the guy that got you onto this programme. He used to be my PA. I didn't
did.
actually see it was from him
That's
until I read it.
so funny. I love Grant so much. Hello, darling. I think it's important because we all go through it. Every single one of us has a story like mine. I'm not unique. I'm not special. I am just a woman like you, a human like you. And it does happen to all of us in some form or another. I am yet to find anyone of my age who hasn't said, oh yeah, I was on the tube, someone put their hand up my skirt, or yeah, I got pulled into a van but I managed to get out, or someone, even one of my friends just yesterday put a story on Instagram, Mixter, saying she was in a carriage with a guy on her own on the train and he just started weeing next to her.
My God.
And she said it was the most powerful, scary, she was really petrified. And I thought, yeah, that happens. It happens to all of us. So I think that's why it's important, because I am just an ordinary person and there are ways to get over it. It doesn't need to define you or scar you or mark you, and I understand why it does, believe me. But there are things you can do to say, you know what, that was just something, one aspect of my life, and I'm not going to let it define me or shape me or hold me back in any way.
But have you had comments from people who say, well, why did you feel the need to put that in? Because I know I related an incident some time ago on the programme where many years ago was subject to a sexual assault. And I got home and my partner said to me, can you keep nothing private? And I said, no, it's important to talk about these things because there'll be many people listening, many men listening, who that has happened to. I mean, luckily, it didn't go the full way. Otherwise, I might have been completely traumatised by it, but I wasn't. But I thought there'll be lots of people listening who've been through this, and as it proved with the number of calls that then came in. So I think it's important to talk about these things because it means that people realise they're not the only ones that it's happened to.
I remember that. I remember you talking about it, and I remember being profoundly moved by it. And also I thought you were incredibly brave. And my view is that if you have a platform, which you do, which I do, I think it's very important to reach out and say, actually, you know what? This is what happened. But the important aspect of it is not that you're sharing salacious detail, but you're saying you're going to be okay.
And you didn't actually share salacious detail.
No.
I mean, you said what had to be said, but no more.
No, and I think that's very important. And the message is, the point is, you're going to be okay. If this has happened to you or similar, you're going to be okay. No matter how much you're hurting right now, what you're going through, you will be all right.
We'll have much more from Amanda Prowse in just a moment. Her book, if you'd like to buy it, is called Women Like Us, a Memoir. And we're going to come to your calls. If you'd like to ask Amanda any questions about the subjects we've been talking about, in particular body image, struggles with weight, grief, 0345 6060 973. It's 8:33 News Headlines with Tim Daly.
Unions involved in the latest round of strikes across the country will meet next week to discuss coordinated action. Civil servants have voted to go in favour of walkouts a day after nurses at most NHS trusts did the same. A man's been told he'll serve another 15 years behind bars for the murder of his former partner. Stephen Craig's already been in prison for nearly 2 decades after he set Jacqueline Kirk on fire in a car park in Weston-super-Mare in 1998. And the Defence Secretary is saying he will believe it when he sees it. After Russian troops were ordered to leave the Ukrainian city of Kherson, Ben Wallace says it would be a significant psychological blow for Moscow forces to leave. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 79 points at 73.75. The pound will buy $1.16 and €1.14. LBC weather, rain continuing in northern Scotland tonight, patchy light rain for the west, and a low of 11 degrees.
This is LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
8:38 on LBC. Best-selling author Amanda Prowse is with us. Her latest book is not a novel, it's her autobiography, Women Like Us, a memoir. We've been talking about it, but now it's your chance to ask Amanda a few questions about the subjects we've been talking about, or indeed the art of writing, because I think there are so many frustrated novelists out there who... Do you think we've all got a novel in us at some point? We just have to start writing it.
I think everyone does, but maybe it's not a novel everyone would want to read. But I think, yes, my biggest sort of thing is if you feel you want to write it, then you probably can, because I never think I'm going to hike up a mountain. I know I can't. But it's just so cathartic. I mean, I think the idea is not set yourself too big a goal. Don't think I'm going to be the next, JK. Be the next you. Write a list, a paragraph, a poem, anything. Just it's such a lovely thing to do.
0345 6060 973. Jules is in Sutton. Hello, Jules.
Oh, hi, Ian. Yes,
Hi.
I was just on the way back in my car from visiting my dad in hospital, actually, and I was just listening in, and I rang a couple of weeks ago when the issue was about the way we speak in accents.
Oh, I remember you, yeah.
Listening to Amanda, I was really fascinated and really identified with what she was saying because, due to like bullying in school, I gained lots of weight and lost loads of confidence, and I almost still feel to this day like I haven't quite got out of the starting blocks, or I'm where I want to be in life. Because I went onto uni to study performing arts, drama. And but never followed it professionally because I got into the charity voluntary sector, and now I work in fundraising. But yeah, what's within me is this real desire to express myself and be creative through performing, through acting, singing. And I'm sort of 43 now, and I'm just thinking, is it too late? I've done a bit of Amdram, but yeah, Amanda just really inspired me with her writing, and it's just really getting to that point where you can present yourself and not be afraid of who you are and what you've got to show, but be confident in it, because I really want to do it before it's too late.
How old were you when you first published your first novel was published?
43.
There you go, Jules. I
really?
kind of knew
Okay.
the answer to that, so that ought to give you inspiration.
That does, actually. No, I'm really going to get into it. I'm just trying to work out ways or routes into it. It's just frustrating when you got lots of life going on. Yeah.
What advice would you give Jules?
I think it's... Hi, Jules. First of all, I hope your
Hi.
dad's okay. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
But also, it's funny, isn't it? I never actually thought, right, I'm going to write a book and get it published. I thought I'm going to write something and see if I can do it. And there's a huge difference between setting something that feels so huge, is almost insurmountable and unachievable. But actually, there are many ways to scratch your performing itch, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's doing a one-man play, which you record and put out on the internet, which you can do for free in a phone in the comfort of your own room. You don't need huge amounts of equipment. You don't need to belong to a large, expensive course or a sort of troupe of players. You can do something that actually gives you a satisfaction when you're performing and learning your craft as you go. So I think set yourself goals that are achievable, because actually if you do that, you're going to feel great. You're going to improve. You're going to get more confident. It's all about that confidence, isn't it?
It is. That's great. That's really good advice, actually. And I had thought about doing some sort of podcast stuff, but I'm not tech savvy. But I think I'll need to be.
That's a great thing. You don't need to be to do a podcast. All you need to have is a laptop, a microphone, and the people who sort of host the podcast, they guide you through uploading them. A friend of mine, I helped start a podcast not that long ago. And he's taken to it like a duck to water, and he's now advising other people on how to do podcasts. So it can't be that difficult, Jules. If I can do it and other people can do it, I'm sure you can turn your hand to it. Thank you very much indeed for your call, and good luck. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask Amanda Prowse a question. Do you like all the things that go along with being a best-selling novelist, like doing things like this, for example, or you're on the Jeremy Vine show on Channel 5 quite regularly, and lots of other media things? Do you do that because, well, you know that if you do that, then, as people are proving on our text screen here, that they're going to buy the book if they've heard you and like you, or do you do it because you actually enjoy it?
Both. And I think at first I was petrified of even speaking out at an event or a literary event or doing radio. Absolutely, just the thought horrified me. it's really, there is nothing like connecting with the reader. There is nothing like having, and I think, if I could have spoken to Colleen McCulloch, who wrote The Thornbirds, or Thomas Hardy, or someone who, believe me, I'm not putting myself in their league, but to speak to someone who'd written a book that I loved, that would have meant the absolute world. And I love that connectivity. It's why I love social media. It's absolutely amazing. And I do have to really combat my nerves. Particularly for TV, because I'm very unconfident about the way I look and the way I sound. And
Still?
Yeah, I think I always will be, and to be honest. And I still also expect someone to, tap me on the shoulder and say, yeah, this isn't really your life, get out. I still expect that even now.
That's basic imposter syndrome,
It is,
isn't it?
yeah.
Which I think most people suffer from.
I think so, yeah.
You have to be super confident or appear super confident for people to think that you don't suffer from it. But even some people who appear super confident suffer from it. I mean, I always think, I wonder if I'm going to be found out tomorrow.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think you're right. I think it is just part of human nature, isn't it? That certainly everyone I know, even if they've achieved things that I think are incredible, they still think, oh, well, it's only that, or it's just that. And yeah.
Who do you like reading?
Oh, any good story. Anyone and anything, it's a good story. Any genre. It could be young adult, it could be horror, it could be romance, anything. But like you, it has to grip me in those first few pages. Yeah, I read a lot of classics, actually, because I don't think I had the confidence to do that when I was younger. I thought I wasn't clever enough. And I find them quite challenging sometimes, but I think I'm sort of trying to catch up on all the things I didn't read.
And was there a writer in your youth you thought, I want to be able to write like him or her?
Judy Blume. Definitely Judy Blume. She's an author that wrote a lot of children's books. And I'm trying to remember who wrote Carrie's War. Nina Borden. I think she was someone I really aspired to do. And then when I got to my teens, it was much more people like Jilly Cooper and Joanna Trollope, Maeve Binchy, Catherine Cookson, all those sort of classic novels, your mum might read on holiday and you'd find,
I haven't read any of those.
Oh, and you've never read Maeve Binchy?
No.
Iain, you would love her writing.
I was more into James Herbert.
Okay, very different.
Very sort of horror.
But I know that you love a good character, and I know that you love a good story. And Maeve Binchy is the mistress of it. She's amazing.
You know, the current day novelist, who's a sort of celebrity novelist, who I really enjoy reading her books, is Fern Britton.
She's amazing. Do you know what? I read her first book reluctantly. Someone gave it to me, and I thought, someone's put another celebrity has written a book. What's this going to be like?
Or has she really written it herself? Well, of course she has.
Yeah, I love her books. I love the way she writes. I love her characters. She reminds me a lot of Lucinda Riley, who I also love, the Seven Sisters books. She's amazing. Yeah, Fern's great writer.
0345 6060 973 if you'd like to talk to Amanda Prowse. Her memoir is called Women Like Us. It's 8:46.
LBC, Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
David Lloyd, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire, who joins me now. How would you characterise the behaviour afforded to Charlotte Lynch? We do agree the arrest shouldn't have happened, don't we?
Yeah.
Therefore, an apology to Charlotte Lynch.
Hold on, Nick. Hold on. I know that you've brought me on this morning to be the sacrificial lamb. That's one of the reasons that I'm here.
You have no idea of my thinking about this interview, but go ahead. If I was commissioner of a police force that had been lambasted by everyone up to including the Prime Minister, I wouldn't be laughing the next morning. Are you going to apologise?
I don't know whether or not she should have been, but to me it seems as if she shouldn't have been. And for that, I apologise.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LBC. Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 10 to 9. We're going to be talking about reality TV after 9 o'clock. I don't know how many of you saw Matt Hancock going into the jungle last night, but I was slightly appalled by some of the things that happened, and we'll be talking about that after 9. I want to know whether you think that reality TV has just become too cruel. It's almost like people who used to go and watch people being hanged. It's sort of bringing back the lynch mob of the 19th century, I think, and I want to get your views on that after 9. In the meantime, we're talking to Amanda Prowse, best-selling author. Her memoir, Women Like Us, is out now. Would you do reality TV? I think you'd be hilarious in some of them.
I think I'd be hilarious, particularly if it involved cooking, because I can't do any of that. How would you like your beans on toast, sir? Yeah, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be interesting, because I like to get to chat to people up front and close, and one of my friends did I'm a Celebrity in 2016, and I went out as her person. The one that meets you off the bridge and does all that.
Who was that?
Carol Vorderman.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I went out and did that. To see it up close, it was quite fascinating.
Did you get to stay in the Versace hotel?
I did, yeah. Not all that in, to be honest.
Yeah, but actually they've changed the hotels. They can't afford it anymore.
Is that right?
Because they pay Matt Hancock $400,000. You see, they've got.
That'll
to
be my bar
somewhere.
bills come in. That's what it is. They've had to. Yeah, no, it was
Right,
experience.
let's take a couple of texts. This one says, "Really loving listening to Amanda. What a compassionate and totally relatable woman." Now, that's a good word, isn't it, relatable? Because you kind of need, when you're writing a novel, you've got to make it relatable to quite a wide group of people. Otherwise, they're not going to quite get it, I suppose. Judy and Nina say, "I'm really enjoying this inspiring conversation. I wrote something simple the other day and was overwhelmed by the response of kindness when I put it out there. We need things like this. Love is a mutual thing. Love is us, you and yours, ours and ours. Ours, O-U-R-S, and ours, H-O-U-R-S, just us. Thank you for reminding me," says Judy B.
That's
and
beautiful.
Nina.
I like that a lot.
And Anne says, "I was born in 1941 and I've lived many lives home and abroad. I should write my life story, but where to start? Also, I don't want to waste time writing as I've been a typist, so I don't feel like sitting typing, wasting some of the time that I have left. But I feel guilty that I haven't put my life on record. How do I solve this dilemma?"
Anne, I'd love to read your story. I really would. Just the tone of it, just writing that small thing. You're a writer. Talk it, speak it. Why don't you speak it into a little, was it called a dictaphone? What's that called?
Yeah.
You can do that, can't you? And that's easy. You can do that while you're out having fun and doing other stuff.
I just think sit down in front of a computer and, well, or you could write it longhand, I suppose.
Yep.
I suppose some people still do. And just write a couple of paragraphs or write a couple of pages and you will know whether it's any good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if it is any good, write another couple of pages. And then the next day, write another couple. You won't be able to write them as quickly as Amanda because she does churn. You are the sort of Barbara Cartland in Azure, aren't you? In terms of churning out.
I lay on a chaise longue with someone peels me a grape. I rattle off a couple of words and then I just, yeah, that's it.
Joanne in Derby says, "Has the internet made it easier or harder to get a story published?"
That's a good question. For me, it's made it easier because I think one of the first things when I started was getting feedback on my work because I didn't know if I was any good. I didn't know if I could do it. I just thought I could. And it's amazing how when that first ebook came out, which was Poppy Day, 10 years ago this year, the amount of people that get in touch with you and say, "Oh, I think this," or "Oh, I think that," or "I didn't like that," or "I love this." And it can shape the way you write. And also there are so many platforms like WordPress, like Substack, and many others where you can put your work up for free. So you can write and publish yourself for free. And if people like it, they will pay for your work and it will bring you to the attention of people who are looking for good writers, who are looking for someone to read. That's the thing. The writing community is a very supportive one because no one reads one book. If you're a reader, you read all the books. So the more we help each other, support each other and share each other's work, it's amazing.
And that's the thing. If you like one book that somebody's written, you're probably then going to buy another one and then another one. And I suspect that's what happens with you. They read one and then want to buy... How many have you done so far?
I think about 30, yeah. I know. My readers are, honestly, Ian, they are, I'm sure every author says it, but my readers are incredibly special. They're my friends, they support me, they send me messages, they ask, they check in, they see how I am. I feel like they know me and I feel like they care about me and I certainly care about them.
Another one from James in Surrey who says, "I want to read one of Amanda's books. Which one would she recommend to start with?"
Oh, I'd start with one set in Epsom, which is called The Day She Came Back.
What's that about?
It's about a young girl who lives with her grandmother in Epsom, who, on the day of her grandmother's funeral, her mother, who died when she was a child, comes back, and she isn't dead at all, and she's been living this complete lie, and it's how her life unravels, how she gets to grips with all that she's been told, and the amazing adventure of where her life takes her. It's fab. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but she ends up having a life abroad, and it's pretty wonderful.
Oh, you see, I'm going to read that now. The one that I most remember of yours, and now I can't remember the title, but it was about domestic violence.
That's called What Have I Done?
That's the one. I mean, gripping. I think I literally read that in 2 sittings. Which your books are not short, are they? But no. I couldn't put it down.
Thank you, Iain.
And here's one from Esther, who says, "Is it wrong to think you can write about a very loved one after their death? My daughter died suddenly, age 42. 10 years ago, I would love to have let people know what an amazing person... Sorry, that 10 years ago, I would have loved to let people know what an amazing person she was." Why would it be wrong to want to write about someone after their death?
I think it'd be a wonderful thing. I'm writing about Simon all the time. I wrote a poem for his funeral, and I will continue to write about him. Not only is that how I'm processing what's happened, but it's how I remember little bits of him. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think do it. I think you'd find it probably very useful and helpful.
The last time you came to see us was when you'd written a book with your son Josh. Remind us of the title. It's
called The Boy Between.
And a lot of people were profoundly moved by that, particularly his story, but also your reaction as his mother. How's he doing now?
He's doing good. Good days and bad days, just like all of us. But Josh suffers with severe depression, which sometimes means he leads a horizontal life. But the future's looking bright for Josh, because actually, and I think the whole message of the book is, it's his story and mine about when depression comes to live in our house, how just totally debilitating it is, that Josh leads a good life, a happy life some days. So getting a diagnosis of severe depression, it's tough, but it's not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be. There are coping strategies, and there are things you can do. And I love the hope that's in that book, and the message that, again, I've said it before, you're going to be all right.
Final text from Zach in Stoke, who says, "When you finish a new book, how tough is the time when you have to wait for the publisher's feedback on what you've written to come through?"
Zach, that's a great question. Do you know, it's really funny. I'm so sort of in tune now with. I've got an editor in the States and one in the UK, and they kind of both get the book at the same time. In fact, I'll send one off tonight when I get home. They will very quickly come back with their first thoughts, which are pretty much always identical. And so it's fairly speedy for me. But also, don't forget, Zach, that by that stage I'm already into my next novel, and actually my attention on the first one's kind of waned a bit.
So you don't have what I have. When I remember when I wrote my book, Why Can't We All Just Get Along? That was the first proper book that I'd done. I'd edited a lot of books, but that was the first one I'd actually written. And I sent it off to the publisher and didn't get any reaction for 3 weeks.
Oh no, that would be horrendous.
And the whole time I'm thinking, they hate it. They're going to tell me to start again. I'm a terrible writer. Why did I do this? Why have I spent the last 6 months writing this?
Iain, that's too long, I would say. No, I don't do that. I'm so busy on the next one and thinking about what comes after that my brain doesn't let me doubt it. But Zach, I am very impatient, I should say, to get it back. So when it does, it's always joyous.
And Eileen in Kent says, "Please tell Amanda that Clover's Girl and £10 Ticket was my first. It's amazing for a first read."
Oh, thank you so much. That means the world.
Well,
thank you, my love.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Amanda. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to buy Amanda's book, it's called Women Like Us, a Memoir, and it's published on Amazon.
It is.
So presumably not in bookshops.
Yes, it is.
It is in
All bookshops will order it for you if they haven't got it in yet. Wherever you get your books, they'll order it.
Fantastic stuff. Now, in the next hour, we're going to turn our attention to reality TV. I'm going to put my contention is that it's become far too cruel. And I want to know what you think. Do you think that maybe it's just a reflection of society, and our society hasn't changed in 300 years, and that if we had public hangings now, you'd get the same kind of people going to watch them as well? It's depressing, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the leaders of unions involved in the current wave of strikes across the UK have announced they will meet next week to discuss coordinated action. On Wednesday, the Royal College of Nursing announced its largest ever walkout, while more than 100,000 civil servants have now backed industrial action. Mark Sawatka is the General Secretary of the PCS union and has been speaking to LBC.
The government's got a week to agree to talk and put money on the table, or unfortunately we will commence alongside colleagues in health, education, transport and all those others who are having to take strike action to do so, because if we don't, people cannot feed their families and they cannot afford to heat their home.
Workers at universities, on the railways and also Royal Mail are involved in disputes over pay, jobs and conditions already. Rishi Sunak has insisted he wants to find a negotiated solution to the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister's been attending a British-Irish Council summit in Blackpool. It included his first official meeting with the Taoiseach, Michael Martin.
I think we all recognise that the protocol is having a real impact on the ground, on families, on businesses in Northern Ireland and threatening Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom, and I want to resolve that. I'm deeply committed to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I want to see the institutions back up and running in Northern Ireland, because that's what the people of Northern Ireland need and deserve.
A police officer has been stabbed to death during a suspected terror attack near a railway station in Brussels. Belgium's Federal Prosecutor's Office says 2 officers were targeted in the incident. A judicial official has told the Associated Press there was a suspicion of a terror attack. Local media are saying that the attacker was shot. Ukraine's president says troops need to be cautious about the retreat of Russian forces from the city of Kherson. In a phone call with Rishi Sunak this morning, Volodymyr Zelensky did agree the Kremlin's withdrawal represented progress, but Yuri Sak, who's an advisor to Ukraine's Ministry of Defence, has told LBC the country remains open to a negotiated peace.
Negotiations have to be done based on the UN Charter and respect for those norms of international law. The Russian troops have to withdraw. Reparations must be paid. So, we have our conditions and they are very sensible. We can negotiate if that is something that can be, how should I put it, taken in by the enemy.
In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 79 points at 73.75. The pound buys $1.16 and €1.14. LBC weather. Rain continuing in northern Scotland tonight and patchy light rain for the west with a low of 11. And then rain in the far northwest will move into Scotland and Northern Ireland tomorrow, although it will be drier in the south with highs of 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Daly.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 4 minutes past 9 is the time on LBC. Now, I quite like watching reality TV programmes. You can veg out watching them. You don't have to think about very much. They can be quite entertaining. They can be quite addictive. But one thing I've noticed in recent years is that they've become sometimes incredibly cruel. Now, I'm not thinking about programs like Strictly. I don't watch that unless there's someone I know in it. But certainly I'm a Celebrity. I think I saw the worst side of reality TV last night when clearly most of these celebrities in the camp, and you think, well, how can Ian have watched it? It's on when he's on the radio. Well, I watched it when I got home. I know I'm that sad. And I watched it because Matt Hancock was going into the jungle and I wanted to see the consequences of that. And it was pretty unedifying, not from his part. I actually think he did rather well, and I think he surprised, but certainly the comedian that he went in with, Sean Walsh. I think he expected to hate him, and actually they got on quite well. But when he got into the camp, it seemed to me that the producers had briefed all of the campmates to ask him really questions that he would never have been asked if he'd been anything other than a politician. And I just found it a bit unedifying. And then you have the public vote making him do the Bush Tucker trial. Well, he'd already done one and absolutely sailed through it, showed no fear, no trepidation at all. And I suspect that that's what is going to happen each night, that he gets voted on to do these things. And then you have the Cabinet Minister, the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton Harris, being asked about this morning, about his introduction to the jungle. And he revealed that even parliamentarians are trying to inflict misery upon the former Health Secretary.
I do believe there's quite a lot of people in a building not too far away from here, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who've downloaded a certain app so they can vote. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. I read this morning what he said about how he wants to prove that all MPs are human, and that's actually, that is true. All MPs are human, but I think we do that every day in our constituencies and what we do in Parliament.
What does that say about MPs that they're downloading the app especially so they can vote him to do Bush-Tucker trials? Now, I get that a lot of people think he shouldn't have gone into the jungle being a serving MP. Chris Moyles said on the programme last night that he thought, well, he ought to be at work. And that's a perfectly reasonable point of view. I can't have a bit of sympathy for that myself. But I just thought that he was being hung out to dry on this programme last night. And bear in mind that there have been quite a few incidents in recent years where people have been horrible to celebrities and there have been some tragic consequences as a result of that. And sometimes you do have to wonder whether these things are being produced in the way that they ought to be. I say no more than that. I don't want to make television boring to watch, but there are limits which I think sometimes that you shouldn't go to. And then you have the sight of Boy George saying he doesn't really think he can be in the camp with Matt Hancock because his mother had got COVID and nearly died from it. And he was sort of saying, well, if she had died, he couldn't be in the same camp as Matt Hancock. Well, Boy George is a very popular singer, very popular celebrity in many ways. But I think sometimes you have to be careful about how sanctimonious you're going to be, given that we all have pasts, and Boy George certainly has a past. And for him to lecture Matt Hancock on sort of ethics when he was sent to prison for 15 months for falsely imprisoning a male escort, well, I'm sorry. Look in the mirror, mate, before you dish it out to other people. But do you think that we are in danger of going back to the days of the public lynch mob, where you would have public hangings, where hundreds and thousands of people would gather to watch somebody being hung? Now, I suspect if we had public hangings now, you would get exactly the same. You would get people who were quite happy to go along and cheer on the hangman. And that's the mentality that I think we've got. And social media emphasises this in a way. Do you think reality TV has become too cruel? There's another story today about David Williams, who has sort of become a pseudo-national treasure. And a transcript has been leaked of some comments he made during a recording of Britain's Got Talents about the things that he said so supposedly off mic about some of the contestants, things that I can't repeat on the radio. Now, again, pretty cruel things, it has to be said, but had they not been leaked by somebody to The Guardian, nobody would be aware of them. And they're things that he said in a break to his other judges. And you think, OK, they're pretty nasty, but they were supposed to have been said in private. I'll be completely honest.